to our first meetup in 2020. Yeah, and I want to personally thank you, Robert, that he stepped up and have a presentation today. He totally saved us because we didn't have anything prepared for today. So thank you, and please.
All right. Yeah, so I'm completely unprepared. I'm a little bit nervous. I just saw that you don't have any speakers today, apparently. So I said, well, of course, if nobody wants to step up. And there was an alternative program, some discussion, which I would also be interested in. Maybe we can have that later. No? So. Yeah. Anybody else maybe who wants to give a lightning talk, maybe spontaneously, or has something to say? No? So what I did was that I gave at Case Communication Congress 1 year ago, not the last one, but the one before in 2018. Go away. I gave a lightning talk about building open source communities. Is that something you would be interested in? Like, who is working in open source? Oh, there are a few people. So you're contributing to open source? Nice, great. That's awesome. I do open source as my main occupation, and I think, yeah, I basically started with an open source community that I will cover here. And all right, let's start. So whoever created an open source project, any repository in GitHub? Did you ever create an open source repository and work on it and publish it on GitHub? I'm expecting a lot of hands to see. And my question is, how many contributors did you have? Like, were you working on alone? Like, who did have more than 5 contributors? 1? Who had 4? Nobody? 3? 2? A few? And who was alone? Who was alone? Yeah. Couple of people, exactly, and that's like the stereotype, which you can see here. Can you maybe minimize this thing here? Thanks. Oh, by the way, yeah, like this. I'm streaming this because I'm asking my coworkers for help. So they can just bless you.
Thank you. I'm so sorry. Really.
No, all right. So I'm asking my coworkers from remote to help me if I'm talking bullshit, for example. And is Matt maybe currently there listening? Matt, did you finish dinner? Is anyone else here?
Sorry, yeah.
Ah, there you go. Yeah. Great. So I'm asking you to help me.
Yeah, there's some crew from Agile Ventures here as well.
Nice, excellent. Going back to the talk, this is usually how it looks like. You're sitting alone in the basement and you're working on a project, you're highly skilled, but there's no one else who's interested in your open source project. And I want to change your mind in a way that you should consider yourself and your expertise and your skill as a resource which is worthy and which should be shared with other people on this planet. And for example, there's this open source community called Agile Ventures. And the reason why I'm showing you this is just to give you an example that these things exist. It's basically just a website and a community, and they have people around the world who want to learn programming, and they connect them with people who have an open source project and are looking for contributors. Does it make sense? More or less, right? And I think this is an excellent idea because you can do so much good. And I mean, I was starting, I had an open source project called Rundfunk mitbestimmen, And I just registered, and people were interested and wanted to, well, program with me and working on this open source project. And I could do something, explaining them things, sharing my knowledge. And they were basically giving me back their time, right? Which is also very worthy. Like if you have people looking on your open source project, giving you advice, and I think it's great, especially if you think about people coming from countries with difficult access to public education. I was born and raised in Germany and was extremely, how do you say, privileged to go to university, for example, to get free education, which is really great. And I had this very traditional career where you go to university. For a lot of people, massive online courses or open source community like this is their way to learn programming and to become a programmer. This is how it looks like. We do a lot of pair programming. So we do a video conference, and basically you can just join, and you have regular meetings, and then you can work together, right? So you share each other's screen, or one person is sharing the screen, and then you have a look, and then you start working on it, and everybody can listen, and yeah. And you, at some point, you're also switching the driver. And that's really great. Matt, do you want to add something?
Yeah, I mean, I had a really great experience with Agile Ventures even until this day. And yeah, it's people. It's also connecting people to nonprofit organizations that actually don't have the money to be able to afford full-time developers. And so it's really beneficial both for nonprofits or for people who have their own open source, but also people who are learning programming or who want to contribute to open source projects that are working full-time jobs. So yeah, it's really great.
Yeah, I forgot that. Of course, it's very beneficial for nonprofits as well. By the way, Matt and I, we are both met in this community, and yeah, that was great. So if you want to do something like this, you don't have to go to Agile Ventures in particular. I don't know, how active are they up to now? They're still active, aren't they, Matt?
Yeah, there's a crew that meets every weekend, for example, that are working on a couple projects, and they're active, you know. Maybe not quite as active as when you and I were first met there, but there's still people kind of, I think, every day having stand-ups and introducing people to the Agile process of development, and yeah, having weekly meetings. And so there are some projects that are a little bit less active, and some projects that are just steady.
Yeah, great. But I guess there are also other communities similar to that out there, I guess. That would be the homework for you. Find out what's out there along with Agile Ventures. If you want to do something like that, your open source project, I can give you maybe three advices what you should do. First thing is you should set up a group chat for real-time communication. Agile Ventures was using Slack, I think, at the time.
Yeah.
And the point is you want to have a really low barrier for contributors. So it should be really, really easy just to join and say hello and what's going on. We want to introduce me to this project, and then you basically can immediately organize things like make a video conference. You can use different video conference softwares. I'm currently using Zoom, but there's Hangouts, I guess. We used it at the time, and Jitsi, which is an open source video conferencing software. Basically, you have a group chat for real-time communication. That's quite important, and really make the barrier as low as possible for people to join. Next thing is you should get a regular schedule, so a regular meeting, and just consider the time, since it's something that's going on worldwide. If you, for example, have an hour, which is, say, in the afternoon German time, you would cover obviously Europe and Africa, and people in America. It's morning time there, but you would, for example, don't have people from Asia. because it's nighttime there. Yeah, just consider that. Different groups have different times. Matt, do you have an overview? What was the very common time? Most of the times we're set to UTC, right?
Yeah, we always communicate in UTC because people are in like really different time zones. But I found that there was lots of times that people wanted to pair with me that was like in the middle of the night for me, and then there was times that people I was pairing with were only 2 or 3 hours ahead of me or behind me. So it's kind of it really just depends on who's active at the time. But I think like what you're saying about having a regular schedule. If you're having meetings weekly or bi-week, every twice a week or something like that, I think you might have some meetings where there's not a lot of people, but if you stay consistent, then people will filter in. And we still have people that are contributing that they maybe get busy for a couple months or 6 months and are not able to contribute, but then they inevitably come back around and start contributing. So
yeah. And I think, for example, Federico, he's living in the West Coast. He's on Pacific time, is he?
No, he's in the East Coast, I believe. But we do have like Nick is in the West Coast, and we have people that like are in Pakistan and India and different places. So yeah, you kind of can always. Not always find someone. There was lots of times that I started meetups or like hangout sessions and no one actually showed up. But like I was just happy to continue doing work in those times, and there are people who do show up sometimes.
Yeah. All right. Great. So that's advice number 2 for you. Consider your time, and third advice is don't make your code a one-way. And obviously, if you want to attract people who want to learn programming, let's say, then you should use popular frameworks and technologies because that's something that people can, you have a use case and you have something, you're learning those frameworks along the way. So in this case, since we have the VueJS meetup, use VueJS maybe. Yeah.
Very popular.
Yeah. Oh, there's even advice number 4. Embrace non-code contributions. That's true. So I think this is a chart from the open source guide, and it should show you that with larger projects, the amount of non-code contributions increase the ratio. So small repositories have usually just one contributor, and there's not as much communication going on because maybe just one person. But once you have more and more people getting involved, you have obviously more non-code contributions. And consider not only code as a contribution. So opening an issue, writing a bug report, writing a feature request is a contribution. Writing documentation is a contribution. Adding translations is a contribution. Reviews. I'm doing reviews all the time. I think I'm doing more reviews than I'm coding by now. All of those are contributions and are really highly appreciated. Anything up to that, Matt?
I don't know if I remember everything on the list, but we've certainly had people helping with like project management, also with things like user experience surveys and stuff like that. Like I was thinking on that screenshot that you shared earlier, I think I forget her name. She was helping out Miss Bestman with some user experience type stuff, wasn't she?
You mean Lindsay?
Yeah, that's her. Yeah.
Yeah, she was becoming a product manager, and so she used it as kind of training, making, for example, prototypes for the app. Great. And since this is the lightning, or this was supposed to be a lightning talk, this is the end of the slides. And I saying spread the love. We are recording pair programming usually. I got a little bit lazy, so I think my last recorded pair programming is from August. But if you follow this QR code, you will get to my YouTube channel, and I have a lot of videos there, which is also like training material. Think of consider your knowledge or your skill really as a resource. And what we're doing here, for example, me giving this talk is piece of knowledge that needs to be shared and can be spread out to the world. Maybe he's someone who's interested and can learn something. So always think about recording your pair programs. It's really easy. You just work with someone and you just click on, you just have to remember that you need to click on the record button. And then you can just upload it to whatever you want, to YouTube, or you can upload it to PeerTube, which has become my favorite open source YouTube alternative. Yeah, PeerTube.
The other benefit as well is like Mike joined earlier, for example, but he has to head home, you know, because it's quite late where he is. So he can actually watch back the video that we're recording now.
True, absolutely. So people who missed out on something can just watch the video. And yeah, that's the last slide. And now it becomes a little bit unorganized because I now have to make a transition to my current work. You're laughing.
Yeah, he tried to get your QR code and you always like, that's fine, no problem, we will find you. Yeah, there are like million Robert Schaffers.
Yeah, that's true. I have a very common German name. Where are you searching for me?
YouTube.
Oh, yeah, YouTube doesn't allow you to get a unique URL unless you have so and so many subscribers, which I don't.
Are you related to Joe Schaefer that's in the call as well, or?
That's my brother.
Oh, okay. I thought it was just a coincidence.
No, that's not a coincidence. I also told him, yeah, why not? Just join our meeting. Yeah. So this lightning talk was, yeah, right. The slides. I don't know. Do I have them already out there? I think so. So you can find me on Speaker Deck. Yeah, there we go. No, that's the one. That's something else. So speaker.com, Rohschäfer. Okay, it's not here. I'm gonna upload it for you. Yeah, I will upload it here. Anyways,
someone Faith pointed out in the chat that
Matt, sorry.
I was just saying that Faith pointed out in the chat that that at Agile Ventures there's like premium mobs. So one of the mobs that's like continuing to happen is that mob, which really helps people who are looking for jobs. You know.
Yeah. Right. How does the premium mob works? Actually, I don't know exactly.
There's a link you can go to on Agile Ventures. That's I think it's just /premium, and there's like different levels of membership. Like the basic membership is free, but then if you want like more time with mentors, like specific mentors, or you want to join there's like daily mobs that handle different tech stack. So
okay, fair enough. Well, I don't know exactly, but great. So Faith, was it useful for you to find a job already? I'm really happy that you're here.
Yes, very useful.
Very useful. Great. Nice. Awesome.
Yes. So from the experience I gained being in the community, working on projects, and also the help I get from people.
Could you repeat the last sentence?
I'm saying from hello.
Yeah.
Yeah. So from the experience I got working on projects, helped me, and also getting help from people in terms of preparation for my interviews.
Nice. Preparation for interviews. Great, cool. That's, by the way, also a great advantage of doing open source. You can build up your portfolio, right? So open source does not only have the big advantage that you can immediately learn something, but also my experience was if you, for example, apply for a job, they don't ask you for a CV anymore, do they? They ask you for your GitHub account. What is your experience so far? Who applied for a job in the IT? CV. Plus GitHub. Both. Anyone?
That's been my experience as well.
Yeah.
I mean, some of them don't specifically ask for your GitHub, but it's sort of it's an expectation.
You have this HR firewall, and you have to test that. Then you get a programmer that will usually click on the GitHub links.
Yeah. Great. Okay. Yeah.
Just to on that point, William from Neo4j, he made the exact same point. Like without actually talking to you beforehand. Like he came to, we went to a meetup with him, and he made the same point that he doesn't ask for CVs. He just asks for people's GitHubs.
Yeah, William Lyon of Neo4j, who's working for Neo4j.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. That was in this lecture. Yeah. So great. By the way, you can always ask questions right in the middle. I'm not in a hurry because how long should is the talk supposed to be?
As long as the text, usually we give an update.
Yeah, right. Yeah, there's one question.
Yeah. Do you reckon that the GitHub should really reflect, I don't know, the like a huge amount of years of experience, or like things that you've done in your during your career, or can maybe just be things that you've done in your spare time, such that you can still demonstrate what you've got for a particular position?
So if I get the question right, you're asking, is my GitHub really representative of my skills?
Per se, but like for anyone, like for any given person.
Yeah.
If you let's say I haven't had much of a chance to work on such projects in my day job, then, but if I've been playing around with projects I can put up on GitHub in my spare time, whether that would count.
I mean, you already gave the answer.
Yeah.
Right? What about people who are not working in open source? I'm one of those very few people who have open source as a main job, which you can see if you just click on my profile. And this only means apparently I'm working in open source. That doesn't mean anything apart from that. So I'm talking about this punch card that you can see here. When I see this punch card, I usually just look for, okay, this is someone who's working in open source. What I also see sometimes is if you have a gray line going from one way to the other, this means this person has some day off, right? So, which you can see here. So apparently this person doesn't have a life because he's working on the weekend too. That's it, what you can tell from that. If you're not working in open source, of course you cannot show it, right? Because your code is somewhere in a code base and at a company. And that's the point here. Open source means you publish your work. So publishing your work is a privilege, like great, because you can actually show it to people. If you don't publish it or you're not allowed to publish your code, then you have the problem that your future coworker cannot have a look into it. So it's a dilemma. It doesn't mean anything about your skills, but it's always great if you can show the code to someone. Yeah, does it answer the question?
Yeah, it does.
Great. Thank you. More questions? Yes, one question. Yeah?
You said it's more on the downslope. Would you recommend other? You said we would have to Google it, which I can manage, but what should I care about when I search such portals?
Yeah, so I mentioned Agile Ventures, which is on the downslope, which I don't know actually, because I haven't been active in Agile Ventures for a while. I'm giving this example because everything I learned about working in an open source community, I learned it there. That's why I'm introducing it. And yes, you have to Google for it. And what should you have, what should be important? You should feel good about it, right? Think that you do something valuable for other people.
Oh, I know, but I was going to have something offered. How do I select from your experience? Maybe you guys you have in mind, what are the criteria? So we would say, okay, that's the right one to take.
You're talking about specific open source projects.
Not the project itself, but the portal.
Yeah. Do you know 15? I only know one. Can you name the other? Like, I'm really interested.
Have you? No. When I Googled it, and so just to know if you have some metrics that show how attractive.
Yeah, I guess the number of how regular people meet, how many active projects are there, how many members, and if you have a good feeling, just join a few meetings and then see if it fits for you. Like, listen to your heart.
And of course, it's also a personal interest. So for one person, this could be beneficial. Okay, I'm working all day with
VueJS, and so I want to contribute in any way, or the other way around. At the private time, I want to do I don't know, the TensorFlow, some machine learning, and do stuff there. It depends on your personal interest. But if you search for something that you're interested in, you will likely find it, or build up yourself one.
Which project would you use?
Which project?
Yeah.
I was several years in the Drupal community very active, and I contributed modules and had some other modules with patches and stuff. For example.
Okay, so what do you want to use?
No. For example, the Drupal community is quite big with 200,000 active developers, and so there were naturally already documentation where I can join and start from. So smaller projects need common platforms.
Really, I'm not. So I don't want to advocate the name too much. I want to advocate the concept. And to give you maybe 1-2 examples that I know of, which are less social, but still going in the same direction, is for example code triage and Up for Grabs. This is more like an offline thing, right? You just register, and then they send you messages like code triage, or I hope I pronounce it correctly. Or you just search for things, like you search for VueJS. There we go.
There are also more, not all of them are tech well, but I used this platform a lot in October, for example. Although most of my own open source projects were enough.
Nice. Yeah.
I have a question. How is it? So you publish a project, and normally a project is something you are interested in, because it's something you like. And how is it to, let's say, sell the idea, or will people look? It's because you have a really good description, or you put some keywords, or how is it that people really find you? Like, is it easy? Like, for example, you asked at the beginning, who had 5 contributors, who had 4. I think it also depends if people find you, of course. If people find you, and also somehow related to your idea, and then where they want to contribute.
Yeah, so to repeat the question, just to get a common understanding, is if you have your own open source project, how can you tell what you need to do in order to attract open source contributors? And that's the difficult question, which I also don't know the answer for. So sometimes I'm asking people who found us, how did you find us? Or I'm asking our open source contributor, what do you like about this project? Or what did you felt intrigued by when you joined it?
But that means you started your project, you just upload it, and
keep your fingers crossed. Yeah, and yeah, basically that's kind of it. So what changed since 2 years or so is I found an occupation, and I'm now working for an open source project, fortunately, which is called Human Connection. And it's also using VueJS in the front end. What is Human Connection? It's a social network, basically. It's a free and open source social network. Free and open source social network for active citizenship. There we go. And I'm working for it for a year, and I'm quite happy. It's originated in Germany. And the website is of the first instance is called human-connection.social. You can check that out. And it's basically a social network. I think the original idea is that you want to advocate active citizenship in some way. It's donated. It's based on donations. So there's an organization behind it, and people and our users are donating. So I think we have about 2,000 human beings who are donating for it, and that pays my salary, basically. And the good thing about the donations is that we don't need to optimize the application, for example, for advertising. Right? Most social networks have advertising as their business model. We don't need that. Because we have our donations, and also we can build features that are the primary goal is to solve a certain problem for people, right? And so if people are interested in doing something good or doing something for planet Earth or the neighborhood, they can communicate with other like-minded people. And we're also trying to get feature requests, for example, from our users. So one user recently asked, hey, can we have some sort of group feature where we can join and have a particular common interest, and people can join or unsubscribe, and then they get notified for everything that's going on in this group. And yeah, and the whole thing that I introduced you in before, like all my knowledge about how to build open source community, I tried to apply that when I joined Human Connection. So I asked my boss, this is open source and you're not really leveraging the potential which is in this project, right? Because you're not going out and try to teach people how to work on the frameworks and technologies, for example. I mean, that's a great thing about open source project. If your source code is out there, you don't need to sign a contract in order to work on it, right? So my job is really to help people learning with the code and also build this open source community. Matt, you're also really interested in onboarding new people, is that correct?
Yeah, definitely. That's one of the things that was the reasons I wanted to come work for Human Connection, is continue building the community of people working in open source and sharing knowledge, you know?
Yeah. This is our technology stack. So in the front, we're using VueJS. We're using Nuxt.js as well. We have GraphQL as an API between our frontend and our backend. And we use Node.js in the backend. And since we're using GraphQL, we're using Apollo server. And we have not a relational database, but a graph database as a database. So I'm calling this sometimes the hipster stack, because it's basically a collection of hyped technologies. And honestly, I really learned a lot since this year, or a little bit more than a year. I had no experience in VueJS, neither with Nuxt. GraphQL, something that I learned while working on it. Same as, well, I had some small experience with Node.js before, but certainly never with anything like a graph database, for example. And by now I really like the whole concept of graph databases. And I'm even sometimes questioning why we call relational databases relational at all, because they're table-based databases, not really relational. And some...
The tables have relations, and that's strength. So that's the whole.
Yeah, right. I mean, I think of relational databases with tables as something like a special case of a graph database.
Anything is a special case of graph.
Correct. Right. So, Matt, do you want to say something about our technology stack?
No. I was laughing in the background. You call it a hipster stack, and I was thinking about the fact that you really like working with graph databases, but then every couple of weeks you think back to your days with Ruby and how easy certain things were with active record and stuff. So
that's true.
I think it depends on what moment you catch you at,
Yeah. So I'm originally a Rails developer, and I really like the OR mapper in Rails, which is called Active Record. And that's what you do usually if you're working with a relational database. You have something on the application level, which is doing all the hard work for you. And with Neo4j, there are not too many integrations out there especially for JavaScript. And you have to write your own Cypher queries. Cypher is like the SQL equivalent in Neo4j. And this brings me to another really awesome Neo4j GraphQL.js. This brings me to another really awesome open source project, which you all should check out and contribute to, which is like a query builder for a Cypher and for the JavaScript world. It's developed by William Lyon, which I had the pleasure to meet online recently. That's him. We mentioned him in what context before, Matt? Do you
Yeah,
remember?
I was talking about his talk and about open source contributions.
Oh yeah, right. Yeah, Neo4j, open source contributions. He's what is he? A tech lead or something?
Yeah, he has his own team.
He's a code cowboy.
Yep.
And if you want to, for example, work at Neo4j, then you can send him just your GitHub account, and he's happy. And they really need people for Neo4j GraphQL.js, which is like the same thing, like the glue code between your JavaScript world and your graph database. If you want, you can try out the development environment. So our build server is always deploying it, and the user account here.
It was actually down today. We still have the issue of because we automatically deploy from Travis CI, and it triggers a deploy like 20 times a day. It actually runs out of space quite quickly, but I've just fixed it today.
So is it down or is it not?
No, it's up, but it's .org, not .net.
No. Okay. So most of the time you can log in with these.
It's .org, Robert.
It's .what?
.org. You put .com.
Oh yeah, true. But it's not working either.
No, you put .rog now.
How often can I misspell something?
Yay.
Nice. Cool. So you have access, and you can basically do everything you would expect from like a social network. You can write posts, and you can tag things, and you can mention other people. And hello, VueJS. Is there any particular feature that I should demonstrate, Matt?
You can very simply create a social network of people in my streets.
Yeah, you can create a network for people in my streets. What's like the question is probably, can you give a little bit more context about the purpose of the network, right? Yeah, well, it's not for your neighborhood in particular, but of course. So one of those features which are yet to be implemented is you want to connect with your people offline. Since we are not optimizing for advertising, we don't have to make people addicted, right? So most of the social networks are making you addicted, and they want you to spend as much screen time as you can. Well, because you will see ads, and more screen time means more profit. And that's not what we are interested in. We are interested in that people just connect, and maybe also connect locally, do something good. And one of those features is indeed you want to see, you can, for example, say, I'm from Berlin Wedding, and who else is from Berlin Wedding? And do we want to make a meetup, for example? There was a local meetup of users here in Berlin, which I attended, which is also really interesting to see who's actually using your stuff, like who's using the social network, how do the people look like, and that's great. Does it answer the question? Yeah. Maybe also what I find really interesting from a technical background is, does anyone know Mastodon, or has anyone heard of the so-called Fediverse? 2 people. Then can you explain what's the special about Mastodon or the Fediverse?
Sure. The idea is that you have different services that can talk to each other. So most of them are more like Twitter alternatives. Like Mastodon, for example, is a lot like Twitter with some nice extras. But the idea is more to have the social network thing itself as a protocol layer, so that different services, completely different services, can talk to each other, and you can subscribe to people on other services. Have your own server.
Great. That's great. That's a great explanation of Mastodon. What about the Fediverse, maybe?
That was the Fediverse, I thought. Mastodon is just part of it, right?
Yes. So the Fediverse is a collection of social networks, and they all use the same protocol. So it's a communication protocol. If you implement this communication protocol, in the case of Mastodon, it's called ActivityPub. By the way, a W3C standard. So it's coming from the consortium thing, the group that is deciding how the internet works. There's also this website here. So once you implement ActivityPub, which is like a specification how the social networks should interact, you are compatible with that, and this defeats in a way this solves the problem of this lock-in effect. Probably you know that there's always some kind of social network coming up, and you're supposed to join, and once you're in, it's really hard to get out. And with this protocol, it doesn't really matter which social network you join, because you can communicate over the borders of other social networks, right? So I could, for example, if Human Connection implements ActivityPub at some point, which unfortunately doesn't yet, but it will, then I can have suddenly access to millions of users around the world who are already signed up for some kind of social network. I think for Mastodon, there are about 2.5 million users worldwide. So it's not a small community, it's considerable. Not in any comparison to the big social networks who have, I think Facebook has 100 times of that user base, but the point is it's not nothing, right? And yeah.
Based on metrics, or is it something own?
Yeah, so matrix is also a specification, and I personally also like matrix, but I'm not really familiar with it, but maybe you are.
Yeah, I heard of it. I thought that Mastodon is based on metrics.
Okay. Metrics is more for real-time information. I mean, you can use it for everything, of course, but it's more for chat. Like that is real-time.
Okay, so the other one is more for profile syncing.
Yeah, that's how I understand.
Events in general, everything that is kind of events. While metrics, of course, also uses events. Sorry, I'm really into this stuff, so I can answer this question. But metrics is more for, you can build chats with rooms, you can build organizations, you can also bring together different chat apps if you want. So this is kind of real-time communication model.
Yeah, what I understand about metrics is that metrics is for chat what ActivityPub is for social networks.
Yeah, you can say that.
I myself don't know a lot about matrix so far, but I think it's great and it's looking very, very promising. One of the networks that I forgot to mention, PeerTube, they are also using a matrix chat. So PeerTube is, I mentioned it already because it's like the free and open source version of YouTube, also implementing ActivityPub. So you can watch videos from other platforms as well. And they are using also Matrix for the developer community. And that's something I want to implement at some point, that we have Matrix. We're using a Discord server right now, but I think since we are a free and open source project, we should probably not use something so proprietary as Discord, although it's very convenient. So contribute. So they have ISC, but they also have a chat over Matrix. And then you can just join, and that's awesome. If you want to join us, then you can go to the developer chat, and there's this friendly and open source community on Discord, and they would get a link. This link will basically invite you to our Discord chat, which we can see here. And there's, for example, Mike, who's asking to share the slides after the talk. I'm not only sharing the slides, but maybe the video of it. And this is great. People can just join and immediately talk to the developers directly. So, which is a nice connection to what I said earlier in the thing, set up a real-time communication. If you're interested in, we also, oh yeah, there's one technology which is not listed here, Kubernetes. We're deploying our application with Kubernetes on a cluster in Frankfurt. It's provided by DigitalOcean. I talked to a couple of people about Kubernetes before. Who knows Kubernetes? Yes, you? All right, nice. So if you want to learn more about it, are you using it in production already for your job? There people are nodding. So yeah, well, you are already familiar with Kubernetes. Everyone else who wants to get familiar with it is very welcome to join us. And we'll provide an open source cluster for people who want to deploy this application. Right, so we have a production cluster, which is, because it has user data, a little bit more protected. But if you, for example, want to try out Kubernetes and you don't have a cluster at hand, come to us. Matt, do you want to add more?
I was just thinking about how we were talking about using Matrix for the chat, and then I got distracted by looking into how we might do that.
Yeah. Ask the people at PeerTube. They told me how to do it.
Oh, really?
A friendly user who kind of explained it to me, and I didn't have the time to take care of that myself.
Yeah, I was also thinking about the bounty program, and like how it would be kind of nice to put that in the bounty program, but maybe it's kind of too big to start off with.
The bounty program. So I asked my boss about the bounty program, and he said yes. So we can, I don't know how it works, but we are probably going to, since everything is on GitHub, we are assigning a bounty. And if you want to, for example, get some financial compensation, if you want to contribute, then you can do so. It's really starting. Does anyone have experience with an open source bounty program? Did someone ever set that up? Because I don't know anybody, and I couldn't find best practices on the internet how to do that. I would be really interested to talk to someone who has more experience in it. But yeah, that's maybe interesting for you as well. If you're learning to program and you have some free time, then that might be something. Yeah, maybe I should give some more space for questions. Yes?
How did you come up with the idea of using Neo4j?
That's a great question. So why do we even use Neo4j? It wasn't me who came up with the idea. That was another developer. Yeah? Yes. What is Neo4j? Neo4j is a graph database. So you probably heard of databases like Postgres, for example. Those are so-called relational databases. Relational databases have one thing in common. They are all based on tables. So you have a database, which is a collection of tables, and you can, the relations are expressed with so-called foreign keys, which are references between two tables. Does it sound familiar? Did you have the opportunity to work with relational databases already?
I just started coding last year.
Nice. Great.
In terms of databases, I only work with
Mongo. Well, that's a database. It's not a relational database, though. It's also one of those. Yeah, there was someone. No SQL database. Yeah, MongoDB is, for example, document-based. So you have some kind of hierarchy, always like a tree of things, and you can nest it. And yeah, and Neo4j is also a NoSQL database because it's not only using SQL, but actually it's not using SQL at all. But the definition of NoSQL is, I think, not only. Wikipedia.
you can think of it just like a bunch of Excel tables, and you can query that within these tables with some language.
I happen to have an instance of Neo4j running on my computer, and Neo4j has a nice web interface. Come on. What's going on? Okay. Now it's there. There's a nice web interface, and let's see if I have some data in my database. It's a SQL similar kind of query language. And a graph is basically just a set of nodes that is, think of it as those bubbles here, and connections between those. We can have a look. So each of those colors represents some kind of type. So we have, for example, users who have written a post. So you have a connection from the author, which is a node, and the post. So if that user wrote the post, then there's a connection has wrote, I think.
So the difference with the normal relational databases is that you can create relationships on the fly. You say this with this, and you create a graph, basically. Exactly,
you create a graph. So here's a Cypher query now, where I'm querying for all relationships of type wrote. And for example, we have a comment, and there's Hui, that's a user, and this user wrote this comment, and it feels very natural to me, more natural nowadays than relational databases, which are based on tables, and there are no foreign keys anymore. So the references are an implementation detail of the database, which I really like, because if you write SQL yourself, you have to pass in for example, the foreign key. You have to say, connect this table with this table by the foreign key user ID. And this is something that you don't have to do. You just say, give me all the users who wrote something. That's it. So Neo4j is something I'm also suggesting, because it's a great technology and should get more attention, and more people should build real applications with it. I talked to William Lyon, and most customers of them are using it for some internal applications. So for example, Financial Times is using it. Not so many use it as a primary database, as a first database. And we're using it a primary database because we're dealing with a social network, which is in its essence a network. So that probably answers your actual question. We have our use case, which is a network, and this is a database, which is displaying a network. So we thought that could help us to simplify things. And I think using Neo4j wasn't the worst decision. There have certainly been worse decisions than that in our code base. And Neo4j is quite great. Yeah.
If you have a data that's really connected and it's have a graph-like nature, it's really difficult to integrate it with the SQL database, because when you're querying, you have to create a lot of joins and then a lot of like, it's a difficult process. But with the graph database, it's really easy to capture graph-like nature data. It's really easy to build an application that have a graph-like nature.
Yeah. So you're saying if you have a lot of connections in your database and you have a relational database, it's becoming really difficult to write an SQL statement for it to put everything together. And that's particularly easy in a graph database. Also, there's some examples. For example, you want to say, give me all nodes that I can reach from this user by maximum 3 edges, right? That's something that's really difficult in a relational database, or almost impossible. I don't know, but that's something that graph databases are made for. So give me all friends of a friend, for example.
Usually you get the problem in a relational database that you have not once the unique entity of something you find, but twice or more. So you have to fiddle around to unique the result again. And I think this problem never occurs when this kind of type of database.
I don't know how long I talked. Do you still think it's interesting, or shall we make a stop at this point?
I'm interested.
I mean, yeah, we can also have a nice chat with Amati, for example, or a beer. Do you have more questions? Did I forget to say something, Matt?
Nothing is jumping out at me, no.
Yeah, and maybe I should mention, if that wasn't clear, we are a team which is only working from remote. So all our friends here are now listening via remote, and we don't have an office or something. So everything happens on the internet. Yeah. So maybe I forgot to say that. Is this a great moment to end the talk? So, I mean, I hope that you learned something. I mean, this was completely unprepared, and I hope you don't regret, or you didn't regret to come here. Maybe some did, but I don't know. Yeah.
I just want to ask you something about the deployment of Kubernetes.
Yeah.
As a procedure was difficult, or like the steps are.
It's certainly something that I mean, this was also the first time for me to learn Kubernetes, and I tried my best, and also my friends to document everything. So if you go to our docs, which you can find at docs.human-connection.org, you can go to Kubernetes deployment. There's a whole section how we deploy this application to a cluster. The first thing that you should do is you put this into a container. We use Docker. I heard that Kubernetes is also compatible with other virtual, container tools, but traditionally you would use Docker. So you first thing is you Dockerize your application, and then you have to write a Kubernetes configuration for it. How this gets deployed, what are the services, and where the dependencies. And you can start with Minikube. Minikube is a cluster that you can run locally in a virtual machine. Kind of slow, but better than nothing. This is how I learned to use it. Right, so you have your own cloud on your machine. Yeah.
It depends if you are macOS or Windows. You also can install Docker for desktop or something, and there is also a Kube cluster.
Oh, nice.
Docker also has on Kubernetes. You can also run on the local cluster in your own machine.
So if you install Docker on macOS, some Kubernetes stuff comes automatically with it.
Yeah.
Nice.
Because you just have to click. Here you just start the Kubernetes cluster from there. It whittle around, and then you're good to go with kubectl and all the stuff.
Yeah. All right. I would say my last words are spread the love, share your knowledge, think about support free and open source software, write open source software yourself. I'm really a big fan of free software. I'm demanding that for political reasons, we should have more free software. For example, social networks. The current political debate is all about regulating social networks, and I think it's much better to support free software, which is by definition transparent and publishes their algorithms, for example. Yeah, share your knowledge, free software. What else? Spread the love. Thank you.